since it's 6:30 and we have a forum.
We have a forum.
I think I'll call the meeting to order.
We can be sure.
We are speaking into the owls today.
Oh,
We're not admitted now, so we have to project our voices for the middle of the room. And the owl will circulate around and hopefully you guys will get to see us. And yeah, I'm having trouble signing in. So. I don't understand what.
Oh, hold on a second.
I don't find it the best audio.
Well, we can try using the local mics too. Is this any better, Kathy? Does this make a difference?
you should put volume on the owl itself.
Oh. Yeah, Kathy, can you, can everyone hear us?
I don't know about other folks listening. It just sounds like you're far away.
It sounds fine to me.
Okay. Then
So,
I'll be fine.
I think since we do have members online, I'm gonna ask the clerk to call the roll.
Okay. All right, Suresh Bhatia. Peggy Briggs,
Present.
Brian Conway. Who's our new member. Kathy Pucolo,
Here,
Eric Dolberg,
Yeah.
Don Garofalo. Pat Dyer,
Here.
Don Kupka,
Here.
Lindsay Liss,
Here.
Arlen Reed here, Paul Rodriguez.
Here.
Asi Sadhusaman. Not here. Shri Tupel. Not here. And Lois Wassop.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Well, welcome everybody. I hope you enjoyed your short month off because we're starting again. We're going to begin as we always do with public comment. Are there any members of the public online or in the room who would like to say something? And as always, public comment has to be limited to items that are not on the agenda. So I don't see, anyone see any hands up?
No, it's.
What's the concept of the storm?
So we will move on to correspondence. I just want to say that unless I get some serious objection from people, I'm planning on handling the correspondence a little bit differently. Going forward, we've gotten into a pattern of attaching any piece of correspondence that goes to the general FinCom mailbox. And some of it really isn't relevant to our responsibilities and to what we do. So there'll be some triage on that before and a decision made about what we're actually going to include. And hopefully that will limit the burden. Is everyone comfortable with that? No objections? Okay, good. I don't see Brian on this. Has Brian called in yet?
He just texted me, he's having trouble, he's trying to join via Zoom, but he's having trouble, I just sent him the link, but he may be with us momentarily.
I'm having trouble. I was trying to join so I can share my screen, Brian, and my link from the agenda from the packet isn't working either.
Okay.
So I'm having trouble getting on.
Okay.
So we may have other members who are having trouble getting on.
Okay, well, you had a lot that have gotten on, so would you like to, is there anything you want to share, Lois? I can, I mean.
When we get to it.
Okay, okay.
The next item on our agenda, we are rolling along, is minutes. So I'm going to, all of you should have received in the packet the minutes for May 22nd, June 2nd, and June 3rd. Does anyone have any specific comments about the minutes? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes as a group, or should we take them one at a time?
I make a motion to approve all 3 meetings minutes
As presented.
as presented.
So,
I'll figure it out soon.
Okay, I made the motion and Dawn made the second. Thank you, appreciate that. All right, so we do the roll call vote. And this is for the minutes for May 22nd, 2025, June 2nd, 2025, and June 3rd, 2025, and I will note for the record and the minutes that the FinCom did not meet on June 4th, 2025, so there will be no minutes presented for that, since we just started with town meeting. All right, roll call vote on the minutes for those three groups. Suresh Bhatia, Peggy Briggs,
Aye.
Brian Conway, Kathy Kukala,
Yes,
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Garofalo, Pat Geyer,
Yes.
Don Kupka,
Yes.
Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Harlan Reed, yes, Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Tassie said Rusaman.
Yes,
Thank you. Sri Tugel, Lois Wassau.
Yes.
Thank you all.
And now, Ryan, if you don't mind sharing your screen, since I can't share mine,
Okay.
I would like you to put up the, finance committee goals and priorities. That was distributed as a draft for people to think about
Let me ensure I put this.
and comment on.
Let me just want to make sure I do this on the Zoom
I think Brian has joined us now.
He has. Yes.
Yes, I've joined. Sorry, I was trying to find the meeting link, but I'm all set. And I'm working on getting my camera to turn on.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Welcome, Brian.
Thank you.
All right. Be able to see that. We're going to try to, yeah, there you go. Cool. Okay.
So this document is not nearly as pretty as the one that Eric did, because he had PowerPoint talents that I do not. But it's the same essential format, so I just wanted to review these as a group. And get your ideas about how we should be approaching those key issues, and input on anything that you think that was left off, so. Why don't we begin with operations? I think this is pretty basic. But I did include a question here. One of the things that we had discussed in our debrief back in May was whether we want to do some more work through subcommittees or working groups dealing with specific topics, for setting up some kind of cooperative efforts with other groups in town. I had one specific idea I wanted to raise, and that is, there's an item later in the agenda that deals with reserve policies and financial policies more broadly. I have given some thought to it, and I'd like to suggest that we consider working on our piece of that with the select board. And the model I'm thinking of is the model that we used when we were developing the pilot policy, and that was a task force, a working group really, that was comprised of a representative of FinCom, a representative of the select board, the CFO. It meant that we were all working cooperatively and focusing on the same priorities at the same time. So I think it created a good line of communication about the development of pilot policy. I think that's a good way to approach the financial policies. We have a priority within that subset, which is refining how reserves are going to be handled. And so that might be the first task that group takes on, but we're aware, Eric discussed this a number of times last year, that our latest set of financial policies on the website date from 2017, and the laws changed since then on a number of topics that are relevant. So it would be a useful exercise on a longer time frame, I think, to look at those. So does anybody have any reactions to that, views on it, doubts about it? I mean, yes, or
I'd like to note that I just looked at the select board's proposed goals and policies that they'll be considering at the June 30th meeting. And they have a financial management set of policies regarding the reserve. My understanding of how this works is, the finance committee's draft that we've presented fits very nicely with the select board's goals regarding financial management. So I think it'll work out, it'll dovetail very nicely.
I would just add, I think it's a great approach, Lois, working collaboratively, will be the most efficient way, I think, to get to, just an update of the town's, financial policies, across the board. And we won't have to go back and forth. I think if we do it, as you suggested, in a cross committee. Similar to the.
that's me.
Well, now that I've made my point repeatedly.
I do have a quick comment on it. I really like the idea, but one thing that we have to watch for is making sure that the people or person who is attending and representing the FinCom kind of speaks to the general FinCom concerns. Because it could be very easy for somebody to speak to their own thoughts and not necessarily represent everybody in FinCom, and it could almost like lead in a different direction and give the false impression that everyone's aligned. You can fix that through communication and you know, like everybody kind of bringing up their comments at a good point. But it's just that it's just thought I would like to share that it's important to guard against it.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's something we can work on with the select board in setting up this working group. It's really, I think our only role here now, today, would be if there's a consensus that we think this is a good idea, we could vote as a committee to ask the select board to consider this. I think you make a good point, Paul. I think the first step is really a committee charge that clarifies what the committee is going to deal with, and a process for the FinCom representative in the working group to come back and report to the full committee to make sure that he or she is not is really acting on behalf of the committee. I see Peggy's got a question, so let's go to Peggy and then we'll go to Lindsay.
Thanks, Lois. I would completely support this idea of having committee, and I like Paul's point that whoever we put on it, whether it's one or two people, whether it's the chair and the vice chair, that it is representative of the FinCom. Policies of this nature in the past, I'm pretty sure have been established more by the town manager and the finance director. So this is a little switch, but I think it's a good point in time to do that because we have been introduced with a new way of doing things, backed up by state policy, and it is very worth establishing, a discussion and thoughts altogether.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If you look back at the 2017 policies, which I didn't include in the materials, but it's available right on the website, listed under finance committee, so it's right there with us. They're pretty operational.
Yeah.
And a lot of the issues that have come up for us in the last several years are more strategic than just tactical. And I think that's what we have an opportunity to work on. So that, it is not our role to adopt policies. It is this a select board's role. So what we would really be doing is trying to find a way to help the select board accomplish that. And to give the select board the confidence that as it goes down this path, it has the support of the FinCom because we've been involved. And we've participated in the process. So, but Paul, I totally agree with your point.
To go a little bit different on that point, after hearing a couple other opinions, you know, if the select board were to use this number of members as more of a sounding board of just like, you know, of the thought process, but also to bring that information back to kind of relay where the origin of the thoughts that made the policy, that would be useful for both groups.
Yeah, great. I think, well, Lindsay, you had your kind of.
I'm sorry, Lindsay.
No, well, I completely agree with everything you've said, Paul, and brought up, and Lois and Peggy as well. This, beyond this specific topic of the reserve policy, or maybe inclusive of this may be an opportunity to leverage the liaison role a little bit better for specific in-depth topics, because that liaison is attending. You know, you have economic vitality listed up here, select board, they're attending those meetings, they understand the perspectives and the you know, the things that those groups are thinking about when they're tackling a certain issue. So it may be appropriate to kind of use the liaison role to maybe accomplish the same task you might create a working group for a subcommittee for, and it might be maybe a more efficient way to tackle more topics than you might otherwise be able to tackle.
I think that could be right with other groups and committees. I think for this specific.
For this topic,
For this
yeah.
topic, I think, a more direct relationship with the body that is elected to set the policies, and that's the select board, is it feels like, an approach that's more consistent with the select board's role and ours, and we've been very different. But I think your point's well taken. When we get to talking about the liaisons, we can talk about whether or not there are certain committees where we want to create more of a relationship with the committee, ask the representative to contact the chair of the committee, get them involved in the specifics and things like that. Yeah, I think you're right.
And just to piggyback, I'll let certify other people want to talk, that the liaison could also communicate more what FinCom's goals are that are related to that committee's tasks, right?
Yeah.
Which is something I don't know, I think we've treated liaison role a lot as an observer role, but it can be a vehicle for communicating FinCom's own priorities in relation to that
Yeah,
committee,
that's a good point.
right? So.
So does anybody else, have any thoughts on this? Anybody want to make a motion about, asking the select board to consider working with us to set up a working group to look at?
Don, you wanna give it a try?
Yeah, I have both. I have one more comment and then a motion. And the comment would be just to the members of the FinCom to take some time to read the policies as they exist today, and then also to take a look at the state's DLS, Division of Local Services, the excellent website for how towns, there's a guide for finance committees and select boards on municipal finance, how these things are done, actually. And you can see that there have been quite a few changes since the 2017 revision. I think to your point, Lois, a lot of it is administrative and not policy per se, and I think we'll defer to the CFOs of the town manager rounds and weigh in a little bit more with the select board to discuss the overall finances. And I move, I think motion that the chair request or propose to the select board that we form a collaborative joint committee to work on that this fall.
Motion by Don, do we have a second?
Second.
Yeah, second by Eric. Any other discussion? Okay, ready for roll call vote on that? Okay. Peggy Briggs,
Aye.
Brian Conway,
Aye.
Kathy Kukala,
Yes,
Eric Delford,
Yes.
Pat Guyer,
Yes.
Don Cuca,
Aye.
Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Carlin Reed, yes, Paul Rodriguez,
Yes.
Kazi Sadruzaman,
Yes.
Lois Wausau.
Yes.
Okay, passes.
It's quite dramatic, Paul. I think that just to add that open,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's it. Just for the record, it is a fresco.
It is a fresco.
So, okay,
Just-
it's not alcoholic, so.
That's right.
I wouldn't want any shenanigans to the,
No, no, we don't serve
Thank
alcohol.
Thank you for having us.
So the next item on the goals and priorities has to do with capital planning. And it was really an attempt to capture the work we did last year and build on it. And this also involves a cooperative effort with the select board and with the schools. I think a lot of progress was made last year, I'm feel good about it. But we still, it would be useful to go back and see if the work has been a little more refined by the budgeting divisions to get a better sense of priorities and timing of some of these projects. I will report later that I had a really nice cup of coffee with the chair of the Carlisle Finance Committee. And they are doing this kind of capital planning in Carlisle. And they've made a lot of progress with the most of the budgeting divisions. Their focus now is to do a lot of work with the region, with CCRSD. So that's something that we would not only be cooperating with the CCRSD on, but also with Carlisle on. And another thought that I didn't have, Don had, and I've been given credit for it, was that as we're doing this sort of bottom-up analysis of what needs are seen in the future, we might want to do a little bit of a top-down analysis about how much there is to spend meeting these needs, which means understanding our current debt situation and where it's headed over the future and considering how much overall debt the town can absorb. So that's something we haven't done in that way, approached in that way before, and it's something that I wanted to suggest we have on our radar for this year, and I've included in the draft schedule a couple of points where we can begin to really get it formed on that and decide what we should do. So anybody have any thoughts about that? Eric does.
I think that's a great idea. I think we got started and made some great progress in collaboration with the select board and the schools last year with those tri-board meetings. I think we all now have a sense of what the needs are across town and we have dollar estimates for most of them. Some of them are admittedly pretty rough. Where I think we still have work to do as a town is prioritizing the needs. So we know, for example, we need to address the public safety building, and we have a ballpark sense of how much that's gonna cost in today's dollars. We know we need to address the DPW campus, and again, we have a ballpark sense. But as a town, we haven't aligned on which is more urgent. I have my own thoughts, but that doesn't really matter. As a group, we haven't force ranked all of the capital needs. And I think that's what we should aspire to get to. On your second point, I think that's a really great idea, what you said you worked with Dawn on. Putting together almost like guidelines for capital spending. And I think that dovetails nicely with the policy work. That could very well be something we want to memorialize in policy, that the town as a policy, debt service payments won't, I'm totally making this up, won't exceed 10% of our operating budget.
And we need to get educated on a number of issues. One of them, there are guidelines, the guideline examples of good one. There are state guidelines about how much debt a town that we should know about, we should be educated about, we should be thinking about as we're looking at all these projects. We also, and again, it's something that I was hoping we have some presentations on. We also need to understand where our debt becomes a matter of concern for the rating agency. And how that works, and we don't have an in-depth understanding of that yet. So I was hoping we could later on in our year, get some presentations on that, get educated on that, and use all of that to inform, to inform ourselves before we actually create anything as formal as a guideline. So I think this is a process that will be going on through the year. And the timing of it will be partly dictated by when the select board wants to pick up capital planning again. We also want to make sure that we're scheduling things that are that align comfortably with the work being done by the budgeting divisions. We're not going to ask the town for capital planning stuff in August because that's not what you're doing in August. So, but as a goal for this year, I think capital planning is something that in the last couple of years, we've emphasized it much more as a committee than we have in the past, and I think it's an important role that FinCom can play. So. Anybody have any more comments? Because I was gonna go on and try and walk through the rest of them a little more quickly. Revenue, really just repeats what we know we want to do, and we know that there are there's limits to what we can do, but we can be aware of what is going on in other areas and support those activities. And I think Lindsay's point about maybe making the liaison role more robust, particularly with certain committees, is great. I don't know what constructive role we can play in the rollout of the pilot program, but you know, if there is something that we as a committee can do, we should be aware of it and prepared to do it. We talked about financial policies, so I don't think we need to go through that anymore. I guess we've already talked about liaisons, and we'll get into more detail about that. And if anybody has, we made great strides in the last 2 or 3 years about letting people know what we're doing. One undone item from last year that I included on this year's list, we talked about trying to make the 5-year tax projections interactive, letting people kind of fool with the numbers and or apply them more specifically to their own situations. I don't know if that's realistic, but I wanted to leave it on the list in case it's something we can accomplish as we're putting together those projections, as we're doing the annual report. And then I think we as a group, and we don't need to do anything about this now, should be thinking about better ways to increase our communication with the town. The bridge has turned out to be a great resource for the town and for us in letting people know what we're doing. There may be ways we can increase our engagement with Minuteman Network. Any ideas that people have, if not now, then as we go through the year, feel free to share them. Because this is, I've seen, this is my 6th year on the committee, and I've really seen a material change in how we present what we're doing. I think there's a much better understanding of what the finance committee does and what it doesn't do around town, and I think we should all feel good about it. The next,
Lindsay, if you.
oh, somebody else,
Do you
Wendy?
Wendy's comment?
Oh, yeah,
Sorry, should I come up there?
Yeah.
oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, I can't get them back there, sorry.
Yeah, I figured. So hi, I don't think I've met everybody. I'm Wendy Ravelli. I'm on the select board and I'm probably your liaison this year. So I just wanted to point out something because I know Dawn pointed out policies by DLS. There was a seminar that I would encourage all members of FinCom to listen to. It was by, I'll send you the link, but it was performed by, it was sponsored by the Mass Municipal Association. And it was about financial policies. And what was very interesting was the discussion that followed from that seminar. Because a policy is one thing, but what you also hear is very town specific. And you have to understand your own town's goals. So just listen to it if you get a chance, or we can get the link and send it to everybody. So worth listening to.
Actually, that's reminding me of something that I had been told, which is that and I may have been part of that seminar, that there's a pretty robust set of model policies that the state has developed. That that we should take as a follow-up item to track down.
Yeah.
That's where I.
Lois, we actually, we actually went to one of the training for that. It was
Yeah.
actually held locally, so
Mm.
we went through that. It was a 2-day session, going through everything. So, those standard policies are there, but then as you said, it gets customized based upon, what the particular needs are.
Yeah.
Eric mentioned about percentage of, capital, a very
Yeah.
common thing there. So that's a great addition. So, we're not really starting from scratch, but if we really are thinking about really looking under the hood and trying to understand what works best for Concord,
Right.
then, you would want to use that sort of template, if
Right.
you will, to help guide that. So
Yeah.
it's definitely something we feel comfortable with and can offer some suggestions and thoughts about it, but then again, ultimately, those decisions are going to be the finance committee and the select board about what
Yeah.
you choose.
So the working committee is gonna be a great way to work through
Yeah,
those
I-
issues, which is great.
Yeah, I think that's the place where the detailed discussions belong. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, if we're ready to move on, we have with us online, I believe,
Yes.
our esteemed town moderator, Carmen.
We can always found.
And we did this the last couple of years, I think, back in our first meeting after town meeting, we really debriefed about town meeting, what our role was in town meeting, what we can do better next year, what we would do differently next year. So, I'll let them start and kick off the conversation, and then I'll ask everybody else to join in.
Sure, thank you so much. First of all, thank you all so much for the work that you do for our town. I really understand that the finance committee is not a light lift. And so thank you all for taking on not a light lift for our community. I think that the briefing book that we did this year was pretty well received by the community. I know that we also had some visitors from other towns who came and thought, wow, this is a great idea. We're going to implement it in our town. I was extremely appreciative of the finance committee's willingness to work with us on the deadlines. It did mean that you had to adjust your deadlines a little bit in order to have the finance committee report ready for its inclusion in the briefing book. One of the things we struggled with in putting, we knew this was a learning experience and this was the first time we were doing it, and we would take away a lot of lessons on how to do it better the next time. And one of the things we struggled with was the order in which to put things in the book. And I know that the finance committee was a little distressed by the particular positioning of the finance committee report in there. But the briefing book is an odd creature because we, in choosing to publish the warrant in the bridge in order to meet our deadlines for publication and to make it cost effective so that we had enough money left in the budget to do the briefing book, we needed to abbreviate the warrant significantly. So we had no explanation boxes. We didn't have the usual letter of introduction. We didn't have the information about logistics for the meeting. And, there were a lot of things that usually go in the warrant when it comes to people's houses that were not in that insert in the bridge. I don't see that changing going forward if we continue to do an insert in the bridge, because it will only be cost effective for us if we can confine the warrant to be an insert of no more than 8 pages. So that's a challenge. And then that means that the book that you're sending people is their introduction to town meeting. So as we thought about it, we thought, well, maybe you need to start with, this is town meeting, here's how it works. And people need the warrant with the explanations. But I'm going to tell you, we're totally open to thinking about it differently. And so we have one example of this briefing book. And to the extent that the finance committee would suggest to us that it would have been better if we had put things in a different order, we are all ears in thinking about how better to present things. So we want to do what's best for voters. And I'm just, I'm really, there's pros and cons to every approach. So we're really interested in feedback from you on that. I think that there's a pretty good push from the town meeting study committee for the hearings to allow a lot of back and forth from citizens. I know how difficult that is for the finance committee because you have so much on your agendas for those 3 hearings that you do. And I was there for your meetings too. They go late and then you still have to take your positions. So it felt like a good balance to me this year in the hearings in terms of how much latitude you gave people to talk about things. And I guess I would encourage you to kind of stay in that kind of bandwidth of allowing latitude for citizens to ask questions and talk about the issues that are part of the articles that the finance committee is considering, rather than being really chop and cutting people off. Which is not to say there's anything wrong with time limits. I think that employing speaker time limits and saying, maybe you're going to give people 3 minutes instead of 2, which is what we do at town meeting. But I think it's totally reasonable to give people time limits and let them come back again. If you make the limit 2 minutes and people aren't done yet, they can come back again if there's still more dialogue. But again, all these things, there's balance to be struck, and different people would strike it in different places, and it's a learning experience every year to try and get it right. So I will say that I heard from some people that the discussion that happened this year on the general stabilization fund, when the finance committee and the select board disagreed with each other, and the town manager and the finance director spoke on opposite sides of the issue. Many people thought that that was one of the most informative and useful conversations that they had ever heard about town finances and town government. So I was totally untroubled by the way that evolved. It would be nice if it happened sooner, so that when I'm trying to get outgoing finance members to stand up for their round of applause, they're not in a huddle behind the podium. But, I know that isn't always within your control. I don't know how to fix that. It would be, so great if we didn't have last minute changes, but the upcoming year will be my 10th year, and this will be my 10th annual town meeting. There have been many special town meetings in between, and every single meeting there have been last minute changes. So I don't know what to do about that. I just think it's the nature of the beast. So really my message is thank you. Keep doing what you're doing. Please give us feedback on the briefing book, which we're going to try and do again this year. We are going to try and make sure that everyone is involved in the schedule for 2026 annual town meeting. I understand that the select board will be taking it up at its first meeting in July. So there will be a draft schedule for them to think about. And in the perfect world, we put out one schedule for annual town meeting and we don't miss with it. So it would be great to get all the input we need as front-ended as possible to think through how we want to do the hearings, what days of the week people want them to be, et cetera. So the extent you can help us with that, that would be terrific.
I'm gonna give one comment right now, Carmen, and Wendy. I would be really helpful if the last finance committee hearing didn't take place the day before we have to deliver the annual report, which is
Well, there you
essentially
go.
this year. I really jammed us up. It wasn't, that's a slight exaggeration. I think the hearing was on a Thursday night and we had to get it to the printer by Monday. If we had to vote on those articles, it made it a lot harder. It didn't give us the option when a meeting went on till 9, 10, or 11 at night to hold another meeting to take our votes when we'd actually had things to think and digest what we heard and maybe sleep. So if that could be factored into the scheduling, there'd be a lot of appreciation on the part of the finance committee. You're right, we have a lot of articles to consider, and having at least a little breathing space between that last hearing and the date that we need to get the report and all the recommendations into you would be huge.
Right. I completely get that. And, you know, this year, because we made the change to decide to try to go to the briefing book and the printing in the warrant, we moved things up a little bit. So we did jam you by a few days. So I think that we don't have to do that this year. And Lois, I'll talk to you offline, and one of the things that would be really helpful is to kind of have some general principles about what would be important to be thinking about as we put the schedule together.
Happy to do that.
Yeah, and I did a memo on that a year or two ago, which I'm happy to send you. And there's a lot of moving pieces, just a ton of moving pieces. And I can send you that and you can see how you think it fits. And I'm gonna have to edit it a little bit to adapt to the process that we have now adopted of printing the warrant in the Concord Bridge and having a briefing book that will be out there 2 weeks before annual town meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
Carmen, a question for you. We've received a lot of positive comments about the new format for the finance committee's report itself. And that's in large part to Don's reorganization. We haven't heard any negative comments about the new format. How do you feel about us continuing on using the same format in general for this coming year for the finance committee report itself?
It seemed good to me.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Carmen or? And maybe a compliment for Carmen, how do you manage that? There was, I understand the impulse to make sure that the hearings are a robust attempt to let people express their views. I'm skeptical as to whether or not that will mean there's going to be less discussion at town meeting, but I understand why it could have that effect. I have no idea how to manage that nearly as well as you do when people wander off topic or repeat the same observations that you do with remarkable grace and courtesy. So thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think our committee, you know, by the time you get there, Lois, you'll have dealt with a lot of public comment.
That's probably true. Don, I had one comment too.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Carmen, that to a person, everyone who I know who who I spoke with after town meeting, who had attended, was so thankful that you are in that role. Because you handle people, you make it seem lighthearted and serious at the same time. And you keep the level at right where it should be. We're so lucky that you have another year. So thank you for being there.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Peggy?
Does that mean we can talk you and your husband into letting you run again next year?
No, so sorry. Yeah, no, he will divorce me.
Oh, well, we'll marry you.
No, he won't, Barney. No, he won't. He really won't. But whatever you need, it's fine.
Thank you, Carmen.
Yeah.
And everybody has, our department will let you go, but thank you very much.
Okay, super. Thank you. And please, you know where to find me by email. And any questions you have or ideas you have for me or suggestions, I am absolutely interested. So I know that we can always learn and make our process better. So thank you all.
Thank you. So now, we're gonna go on to liaison, and I think let's talk about liaison assignments, and then we can do this. By the next meeting, I think we will reinstitute the approach that Eric introduced last year, of doing written reports. It'll be the same kind of thing. I'll send everybody out a reminder a week or so before I need to get the materials into the packet saying, do you have anything? And then I'll compile a document that will put most things in writing. I found it to be a very efficient way to deal with that, and it doesn't foreclose deeper conversation if something's come up that we really need to spend some time on, but I think it ends up being efficient, so I've been happy with it. And if I could share my screen, Ryan, and I'm gonna get much better.
I can try, again, I go back to, with what, okay. Everything's good.
Yeah, green.
But there's a making sure.
Yeah, that's, and now to choose. So. Why is it doing that?
Maybe the setting doesn't allow you to share.
Oh, it's not letting me share. Well, because the document that I wanted to put up on the screen is not one that Brian has. It wasn't in the
Okay.
packet.
It was not in the packet, okay.
No, it's an update document that's in the packet. Because what I did, while you guys were around to defend yourselves, was I did.
Just I to stop.
And now this is a discussion.
You want to close that, just try to listen to it. Sorry, close out this share window.
Won't close.
Oh,
Oh, we closed, okay.
we'll just
Starting
try
again?
one more time, some people choose.
So Zachariah, if you try and make Lois a co-host, cause that may give her some more permissions.
No. That's a good question. All right, Ryan, if you could put up the document that has the list of committee assignments.
Lois, would you try to just make it co-host,
All right, I'm sorry, guys, it's gonna be smoother.
Close that out.
Close that out. Desktop. Allows you to share. your screen.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, no,
It's happening now, so all I need to do is go to the document line.
I think,
should
I don't think you're sharing yet.
You're not sharing
No,
yet.
Should ask you what window you want to share.
But your settings, I think you were in the right one. We'll just try this one more. So go back to where.
You know, this isn't,
Okay, we will do it another time.
we'll
Okay.
we'll
no worries.
practice. Ryan, if you put
I
up the
should,
committee
okay, put up the
account.
original, okay.
Do I need to unshare my screen?
I don't think so, okay. We're gonna go.
Eight down, 47 of the packet.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the one you're looking at only has me assigned to the select board. But that's not complete. So I'm gonna walk you through this, what I've done. I actually I will note where something is tentative because it hasn't been cleared with the person that I'm asking to do it. On the Board of Assessors, Sri, I believe, did that last year, no, not the, half of it last year. I was gonna ask Sri to do that. And also to do the planning board, which is a group that he expressed interest in doing. There is some thought we may not need a liaison for the Board of Assessors, so we can have a further conversation about that, but at a minimum, I will ask Sri to do the planning board. Peggy, you were gracious enough to say, put me where you need me, and I think you understand the CPC committee at a level that most would don't. And if you are willing to do that, I think that would be a real contribution.
I would be
So,
happy to.
thank you, Peggy. Suresh? He's not here, okay, then I'm just gonna assign him stuff. I asked Lindsay if she would consider doing the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust this year, which I did last year, and they're an interesting group, and you learn a lot doing it. We have a vacancy right now. Someone who's given an invitation to join our Hardy band said no. So we'll have another member. So at that point, when the new member comes in, there may be some change in that, but for the moment, Lindsay will do the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. Don expressed interest in doing the Concord Municipal Light Plan, which I think is going to be a pretty critical engagement this year. There's a lot going on. Paul, we didn't talk about this, but I think it's something that interests you. Would you be interested in doing the economic vitality?
Yeah, I do that.
Okay. Thought it would be a good fit. Kathy was just assigned to the land use working group. At the end of last year, and they hadn't really gotten off the ground yet. And she and I did talk, and I know she's interested in doing it, as any of us would be, because it's really an interesting process that they're going through, and it's gonna have a huge impact on a lot of what comes next. So Kathy would like to keep that assignment, and I think that makes sense. I'm gonna skip over MCI Concord because I gotta come back to it, and I'll explain why. Brian, our newest member, I found when I first joined the committee that being assigned to Minuteman was a great education in school finance. I spoke briefly to Brian today, and he actually has interest in the subject as well. I mentioned Sri, planning board Sri. Carlin expressed interest in the Public Works Commission, which is another place that's gonna have a lot of activity. Important activity this year. John didn't express any specific preferences, but I'm suggesting that he do the recreation committee, which I think also fits with a lot of his interests. Carlin also expressed an interest in following the work of the Residential Tax Exemption Task Force. So I'm gonna ask her to do that. Schools. Eric has agreed to be,
Thank you.
yeah, to be the school liaison, primarily dealing with the region.
Yay!
Yeah, I felt that way too, actually. And Pat, when she heard that Eric was gonna do it, said she would work with him on it. CPS.
Great.
We're gonna make that deal. So there's one significant gap in this, and that is MCI Concord. And that's a really important group, a lot of the future of Concord is gonna be growing out of the work that's being done there. Don did it last year. Don has a very full plate this year. Because he's the guidelines chair and he's already been assigned the municipal light plant, which is fairly heavy lift. So I wanted to throw that open and ask who would be interested in participating in that. Don't all rush me at once.
Lois?
Yeah? Hello? I can't tell who's speaking. Peggy, hi.
Yes, I would be very happy to do that. However, I only have 1.5 more years on the board. And it seems like it would be, and I'd be very happy to do it. I know most of the members on that committee, have been on, planning board and everything else, but if we had a freshman that was interested, I think that would be very helpful because this is gonna go on well beyond my tenure.
Right, for a number of years, yeah.
That is true. So is there someone in their first term? Who would be interested in doing this? I think it's hard to do it when you first come on.
Maybe
Yeah.
explain,
Right here.
maybe you need to explain what the liaison assignment entails.
Well, that's a little bit of a moving target right now, because we've talked about this, for some of the groups on the list. It's really just monitoring the meetings, reporting back to the rest of us when anything is happening with one of those groups that can potentially have financial impact in an area that we have some responsibility for.
You have inside Kazi or selection.
Right. No, Suresh is still with the Concord 250, which is still on the committee.
Lois, would it be helpful if I sort of set the table of where we are in this?
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
Okay, so this, the overall committee has formed 3 subcommittees. And they each have their meetings. But it's been an intensive year, and I think going forward, it'll be a little less intensive. Because all of the bolus of the funding for studies is coming to a close with the end of this fiscal year. There will be, so the focus now will turn to the zoning changes that would be needed to implement a vision there. And there are 3 the consultant team has created some straw man, if you will, some models of what this might be. It's available on the MCI portion of the town's website. We should all take a look at them. They've done a great job of informing the public about the costs versus the fiscal benefits as well of various uses. So I think going forward, it's going to be more about incorporating this committee. That committee's job is going to be incorporating the feedback they've heard from the citizens, and then working with the planning board on what would this look like if we were to do this. And then in addition to that, which is the main sort of 50 acres of the site, we'll be working with the town on the wastewater plant and the potential to use a portion of the site for uses that come out of the land use study. That's land use working group. So it'll coordinate with the land use working group, it'll coordinate with public works, and it will be also coordinating with the planning board. That, if that's helpful, I think it'll go from that sort of 3 separate meetings down to 1.
Lawrence, if I may, I've been watching the MCI committee meetings recently, and I know that they're about ready to show winding up their initial contract, presenting scenarios of possible looks for the MCI public property. I'm happy to help with that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Cos would like to do it with me and we could sort of tag team it as a possibility.
I could tag team with you if you wanted to look at that.
Alright, so
I think we don't have a role yet for Cassie.
I'm gonna suggest this, why don't we leave it open for now? And I'll take as a follow-up item to talk to Carlin, Don, and Quasi and see if we can come up with a team approach to this. That solves the problem. Because I mean, I think it's a fascinating project, and if I thought I would have time, I'd do it, but I won't. It's either I do MCI or I get the packets and the agendas in and, you know, it's just, and schedule the hearings and all the other stuff, so. All right, so I'm gonna follow up with Don, Harlan, and Quasi. About MCI, and we will figure out a way to cover some, because it is an important committee, and it's one of those committees where at some point we may be taking an active role.
Yeah.
Rather than just, you know, monitoring. So just to follow up on the liaison aspect, I think actually the report I circulated earlier today, and Ryan, I'll make sure you get a copy of it, that describes the conversation at the chair's breakfast, and serves a little bit as an overall liaison role. I have one report to make, which is not something that's technically a liaison role, but it's it's a report on my meeting with the Carlisle Finance Committee chairman. He's the same chair. They have 2-year terms for their chairmanships now. We don't. And so he was involved in last year's process with us. He's very, you know, very nice professional. It was nice meeting with him, and they're going to be good to work with this year, I think. What we discussed will have some impact on the schedules that we'll be talking about next, I think. First of all, they do want to be a little more involved in our process than they were last year, coming a little bit earlier, and that means just being informational with them first, rather than seeking input. So when we get to the schedule, you'll see that my thought is that we should get started on the metrics for doing the guidelines over the summer, which basically means looking at what we did last year and then making a decision. Do we like that procedure? Does that work? Or do we want to change it for the coming year? So he and I talked about advising Carlisle when we develop the metrics. And I've gotten some feedback from the budgeting entities from the town, right? If I can quote you, that it's useful for the town to know the metrics. Because it does create a set of expectations, and it makes it easier. And I haven't spoken to the schools. We will be setting up meetings with the new chairs of the 2 school committees later in the summer. But I would assume the schools feel the same way. It's good. So we'll involve Carlisle, let Carlisle know we decided to use for metrics. We talked about copying the Carlisle FinCom on the request letters we send for information. We didn't talk about them getting input from them on what they want to be requested, but that the letters would show a copy of Carlisle FinCom to the letter to the region, not to CPS. The letter to the region would show a copy to Carlisle FinCom, and we would expect to share the responses that we get with Carlisle FinCom. So, and we'll be completely transparent about that, so the region understands that Carlisle FinCom is getting the same information that we're getting. There will be budget presentations at some point as we get down in our process. They'll probably be in October. And again, we will contact Carlisle FinCom and schedule them being here for them, but they'll have been a little bit more involved. Then we'll also be advising them of the preliminary guideline number and the final guideline number. And they would like a chance to comment to us, to give us some feedback on the preliminary guideline number. They have some specific goals for this year that I think will dovetail very nicely with ours. They have gotten detailed, as I mentioned before, they're working on detailed capital plans for Carlisle, for the whole town. They've made a lot of progress. They don't have as much detail from the region as they do from the other budgeting entities in Carlisle. So they intend to seek details on the region's capital planning this year. And we should probably be participating in that. It's easier for the region, it's one set of information, and it serves purposes for both, for all of us. They are interested in seeing a 5-year projected level services budget. I told him that we asked the regions for, what the region at all the schools in town for 5-year projections. They're specifically interested in seeing what a level services budget would look like. I'm not sure we've really taken that approach. Could be done a little differently. He pointed out that when they evaluate, the budget request, they find it more comfortable to evaluate it without considering debt service, which we know is going down for the region, and enrollment distribution. We want to get sort of an overall number. And then obviously it's allocated based on enrollment. And the last thing he mentioned was that one of the disconnects between the way Carlisle does things and the way we do things is Carlisle doesn't fund the OPEB liability as aggressively as we do. And the region uses the Concord approach to funding OPEB. So they've been making a lot of progress on it. So that may be the one area where we depart from them a little bit. They see an opportunity to loosen things up a bit, sure, that we may or may not be comfortable with. But and it was a very constructive conversation. I think we will have a good working relationship with them this year. That's my expectation. So, and then Carl, do you want to, and Carl had to.
The first liaison report I have is for the Waters Pond Task Force. That task force is winding up its task. They have reached a conclusion, a recommendation, which they will present to the Natural Resources Commission on July 16th. Now remember, this was a task force that was looking at 3 possible basic scenarios for Waters Pond: dam removal, dredging, or do nothing, or some kind of status quo. They've opted to modify the status quo, do nothing, into a create an active management plan. Use that plan, you can create that plan using another committee who will be a project stakeholders in the community. And then that committee will monitor the plan and implement that plan with the help of a consultant over a 5-year period, and then reevaluate. So that means right now, not immediate dam removal, not immediate dredging, something may be happening, also working in connection with the recreation department to promote the recreation activities. It is probably the most fiscally conservative option of the 3 that were presented. And I've talked to both chairs about this, of the task force, and they're quite satisfied with the end result of this. They thought the process worked out well. The final vote on this was not unanimous. There were 2 dissenters, the committee. So even after a year's worth of working through this very hot button issue, there wasn't complete agreement, but there was more than a consensus on agreement of that. Anyway, that'll be presented to the NRC on July 16th. Then the task force itself will be dissolved. Okay, that's the first report. Second report I have is just giving a heads up to Lindsay, the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust met recently, and they have sent a letter to the select board encouraging the select board to use all of the funds that are garnered from the Newbury Court warrant article that was passed. Roughly 2 point something to mitigation payment. Or the $20,000 per unit that's built as a result of this memorandum of agreement. The MAHC has urged the select board to dedicate all those funds just to affordable housing. My recollection, as a side note, is that the select board had said there were 3 possible uses. One was affordable housing, another was seniors, and the third was healthcare. Now, I don't know if the select board is going to be taken up at the June 30th meeting or first July meeting, but that would be one area of concern. And the other thing is, with the Affordable Trust, they heard that the 91B Main Street piece of property that the trust was thinking about buying from the state may not happen because it's too cost prohibitive to actually build in that lot. The estimate was to build 4 units would cost roughly $975,000 per unit. So they'll be talking about that at the next trust meeting, so I'm handing that off to you. So, what that means was, we had dedicated $500,000 of ARPA funds to this purpose, to buy the lot, to buy the land itself, which the state is willing to sell to us for about $600,000.
When are our deadlines on that, Carrie?
December 31st, 2026.
Okay, so we have some time to
And
allocate.
that's what they're doing, they're gonna try to decide, is there another way to use it for workforce housing, so that'll be more of a discussion. That's it.
We have, already discussed, a chunk of the next item on the agenda, which is, working with the select board on financial policies and, reserve policies specifically. There's one other item that Ryan brought to our attention. The town is getting, well, Ryan, why don't you explain this so I don't misstate it, and then I can read. the
Sure.
narrative.
Okay, sure. So, basically, what we wanted to do is just to give you a little overview. The, efforts right now in the, finance department are really focused on, closing out, one of the main things we're doing is closing out the, current fiscal year, which was FY 25. So up on the screen, you'll see, where our current projections are. We're still working with departments on encumbrances and to close out those encumbrances. So basically, if the encumbrance would be to say, we think we're gonna spend $30,000 with National Grid. And if you get to the end of the fiscal year, you only need to spend 10, that leaves 7 miles. So currently, we are, Zach in particular is doing yeoman's work, getting those encumbrances closed out. I think we setting a deadline for tomorrow night, that those people will be getting back to us. We're hoping to clean this up. So what we want to do is just show you, right now in terms of where we are. We've got our various divisions, which is, general government, finance, planning, jurist, human services, public safety, and public works. So, and then of course, our unclassifieds. So when we go back, in terms of where and what we're projecting right now, so we're looking at under general government, in that division, in that group, looking at potentially, being in deficit about 36,000, and in finance, maybe about 6,000, maybe about 7,000. So we are hoping, that, and intending to, really close out these encumbrances and come in at the end of the year and be balanced. And we think the only other area that we have any concern overall would be, for public safety, which again, if you look at the encumbrances, by in particular, we're working hard to bring that down. So, when we look at the overall number in terms of where we're going to be, we are to the positive about 1.5 million. So, the state allows, us through the 2017 Municipal Modernization Act to basically, vote to, it's a vote of both the Finance Committee and the Select Board that basically gives us, permission to, make transfers among the divisions, the 10 divisions, if you will, down here. And so, while it is our hope and intent to not have to, make any of those transfers, I tend to be a bit more conservative, with these, things. So, I talked about this with Carrie earlier today, and I want to just, propose something, which is, basically, again, the state allows this, this vote, and basically it allows, year-end transfers under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B, to, authorize the chief financial officer, to transfer any amount within the, in this case, the FY 25 operating budget, from a departmental or other appropriation, any other appropriation. So basically balancing those things off. One of the things we talked about, with Carl earlier was, saying, maybe agreeing to this motion, but amending it in a way that, we would report back to you before we, as we're closing the books, to give you an update. If we did make any transfers, what those transfers were, and from what division to what other division. So we're happy to do that and, and amend the vote Colin's suggestion, that's absolutely fine. Again, it is our hope and our intent to not to have to ask for any of the transfers. But we want to, again, I'm trying to be conservative, and if we end up at the end of this process and we're $2,000 in the hole of one division, we don't want to find ourselves in a circumstance where we couldn't make just that minor transfer. So as I understand, the select board, with this, it's too late to bring us up to them to put it on their next agenda, but they are meeting again, I think, on the 14th. So we would bring it back to them if necessary at that time, because again, I would have a sense of what the closure of those encumbrances are. Again, it's conservative, but respectfully request your support for the vote with Carlin, if you wanted to make that amendment for what we were talking about, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, one slight slight amendment to the amendment, I guess, that you've discussed.
Mhm.
I had suggested a time frame
Yeah.
of report back to this, to the FinCom about the amount of transfers by our September meeting, and I think our, you tentatively have the September meeting set for September 25, Lois.
That's tentative, yeah.
That's, but by that, we have a report back, because I think, Brian, you said that you'd be able to have that figured by that time.
Yes.
That sound reasonable?
Yes, absolutely.
I'd like to propose to add to what Carlin's request, that also by that time, September, we get a preliminary view in the status of the joint account spending versus budget.
I think that can be done as part of this motion, or that can just be a request to.
Sure, maybe just reading it again. Maybe, this is sort of specific,
Yeah.
on to this. But
Yeah, it does not need to be.
yeah, I wouldn't mix it. If you
Fair enough.
could, I wouldn't mix that.
Yeah, that's fine.
So, any questions about, the finance department is asking us to do?
I do have just a general question, and my frame of reference is federal budgeting, so please allow me to have that frame. You know, when closing out an appropriation, we always have to worry about antecedent liability for anything that was incurred in current year, but you know, the bill doesn't come and you have to pay it eventually. What's your plan on associated with antecedent liability in moving those pockets? And like, if we give you permission in September and then something comes after that, like what happens?
So you're talking about the closing out of the encumbrances.
Yeah.
Right. So the request to our departments in this case is to close out encumbrances if you know you're not going to be using them. So expenses that are undertaken in FY 25, and you know that's an obligation for the town, and we have to meet that. So this is talking about things that in closing out that difference where you know there's say a $10,000 bill coming in for National Grid, but you've got a $30,000 encumbrance. So that's really what the focus of this is, so that we're also, you know, making sure that we're not bringing forward encumbrances into the next fiscal year. We close that out, that goes to free cash, and we move forward with a clean slate. That's where our focus is.
Okay, good.
So would you need a motion?
I think we need a motion. Would someone like to move the motion that we're now seeing on your screen, move to vote for end of year budget transfer procedure under general law C-44, section 33B, to authorize the chief financial officer to transfer any amount within the fiscal year 2025 operating budget from a department or departmental or other appropriation to any other appropriation. The CFO will report back to Finance Committee no later than our September meeting, the amount of the transfers. So can I have?
So
a motion?
moved.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, motion.
We have a second?
Thank you. I'll second it.
Okay, any discussion, any further discussion about the motion?
I'll just ask in the motion, you referenced we'll get details on the amount of money transferred. Implicit in that, I assume, is like from which department to beyond
amount
that,
and
but-
details.
Okay.
Transfers, yeah,
Okay,
that, I will take that as friendly amendment.
okay.
You know, it wasn't my motion, but.
Yeah, so just discussion, this just establishes that we plan on doing this. You know, we still have to formally vote it in, or are we doing that now?
No, we're doing that now,
Yeah.
we're voting now, and then. The finance department has that authorization from the finance committee.
Okay.
If in fact this needs to happen, they'll have time to go to the select board. We're not meeting again until the end of July, so it's too
Yeah.
far down the road. for-
Yeah,
And this vote needs to take place before June, I'm sorry, July 15th, so that's why
Yeah.
the select board's timing is fortuitous for us, so.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it, I just wanted to make sure that I understood what we're actually doing.
That's
So,
what we're actually doing.
Give them permission.
Yeah, no worries.
They also need to go to the select board, but they can get that in time. They can't get it from us if we don't do it with this meeting.
Okay.
We have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion.
Everybody else.
Are we ready for-
I think we're ready for vote.
Okay, let's do the roll call vote on this motion. I don't think Suresh is here. Peggy Briggs,
Yes,
Brian Conway,
Yes.
Kathy Kukalow,
Yes,
Eric Dahlberg,
Yes.
John Rocco's not here, Pat Dyer,
Yes.
Don Kupka,
Aye.
Lindsay Liss,
Yes.
Harlan Reed, yes, Paul Rodriguez.
Yes.
Ozzy Sadrusavan,
Yes.
Sheree's not here, Lois Wassa,
Yes.
the motion passes.
Thank you, everyone.
Lois, just want to make a point on something. It's not about this, but I just want to point out that this isn't precedent setting.
No.
The school committee does this on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you knew that, and I don't know if we've done it
Yeah.
as a finance committee before. I don't recall it ever being done, but
I don't even.
the school committee does it on a regular basis. Just
Yeah. Thank you.
If it, by any means of perspective, in my prior community, usually I think I'd be putting this out just because it's almost like a pro forma thing. That we were given the opportunity to do, so usually like in the March timeframe, put it on a select board and finance committee meeting agenda, and, you know, it's just. Just giving us, yeah, just as a, you know, as a way to prepare for the end of that fiscal year,
Yeah.
instead of cross out the block, so. Yeah.
No, it makes sense, it was something we had been.
No, absolutely.
So I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. Which is, and Ryan, if I can trouble you to share the document called tentative calendar. We are incredibly 5 minutes ahead of schedule, and I do not want to snatch the feet from the jaws of victory here. We also, this is tentative because the dates, as Carmen mentioned, the dates have not been set yet for the end date is town meeting and then all the dates that lead up to it. So I want to focus in particular. I tried to sort of look ahead for the whole year, assuming that the town meeting would be the first Monday in May, but that is nowhere engraved in stone. That is a date that I had mentioned, but it was nowhere in stone.
hello, on the home screens, we only see, you know, Ryan's files, we don't see the calendar.
Oh. Okay.
We need to double click on something.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Peggy. Can you see that?
Much better,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So, I would appreciate feedback on the full schedule. I want to focus tonight on, basically taking this up through September. And part of what I would focus on, I've inserted a few things that we need to do at some point, and I take points that the items highlighted in yellow, I put in dates that I think works. But I'm happy to get feedback saying we should be moving them to different dates or moving other things up. We've almost made it through today. Our I, put in July 31st as another date. I was hoping we could skip a meeting this time, but I don't think we should. We have to do in 11 months what we did last year in 12 months, so I don't think we really can take on this somehow. If July 31st is a date that doesn't work for enough people so that we don't have a quorum, please let me know. But my hope is that we can do a meeting on Thursday, July 31st. I would like at that meeting to get the report from the finance department on the status of town reserves and joint accounts. Because I'm hoping by that time we'll have made some progress with the select board, talking about setting up policy working group. We'll be thinking about reserves. It'd be nice to know what the landscape really is and understand it better. We should be able at that meeting to finalize our meeting schedule for the full year, because by that point, the select board will have, I think you have it on your calendar for 14th,
Yeah.
It's a date. Yeah, so we'll know about the 31st, town meeting is we start working backwards. And I think this is the moment that we need to start thinking about metrics, not setting them, but really discussing the metrics process, reviewing what worked or didn't. You know, thinking about what we're gonna be doing this year and working on the information requests for the schools. Those really need to go out at the beginning of August to give people plenty of time, the schools out in town. Because the reply date to make it work with their budgeting schedules really should be October 1st. And there's no point in pushing them for information sooner, and we just ask them to speculate about it. And then at the August 28th meeting would be where we will actually approve the metrics. And since wouldn't otherwise be a very heavy agenda, I thought it would be a good time working with the finance department to see if we can begin the work we talked about on debt and on understanding ratings, understanding the implications of reserves on ratings, really getting deeply into that and trying to get educated. September is a little speculative because I believe September may be the month we start working on the capital plan. And that will be happening jointly with the select board, schools, and our schedule. We'll know well in advance what it is, but there's not a whole lot of point in arbitrarily picking a date. And then I would really ask you to kind of look ahead and think about the other deadlines in here. October will be a pretty busy month because that's the month when we'll be getting presentations from the budgeting entities. And I mean, it's incredible. It feels like we did the guidelines last week, but in fact, we're looking at preliminary guidelines and final guidelines. Because once we have that date with the warrant clauses, we know the deadline will definitely be 5 weeks before. So, and there is a column here that that's a little different, which was the finance department deliverables. And that is a bit of a moving target, but still something that I think would be useful, and that's, I'll take as a follow-up item, working with the finance department and with Carrie to look carefully at those expectations and where they are scheduled to occur to make sure that that fits in with the finance department's schedule. So that I think has to sit with me, and I'll do the work with Brian and with Carrie, and that'll look different at a next meeting. And this document I see, until we get a little further down and go finding this is a living document. There'll be another draft of it that'll be in the packet for the meeting. So, you know, any reactions, any comments? Is everybody leaving the vacation by 31st? What are everyone's thoughts?
I like it very much, and I would say in that August objective to establishing a shared calendar with Carlisle income, I'd like to request a a joint meeting about the school's budget in advance of our starting the guidelines to make sure that we're using similar key points.
I'll follow up with Carlisle on that.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, yeah, on that point, isn't one of our agenda items, Lizzie, also that the out of districts that we pulled out this year might not get pulled out next year?
Don can address all that in the guidelines process.
Yeah, that, I think it's important to highlight that,
Yeah,
because it is gonna be an important part of our deciding on.
get that out.
So this is one of those things we want to level set, I think.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that, and hopefully the air conditioning will be working for the rest of the summer. One of the reasons I felt we needed summer meetings was in exactly that. We wanted to do some advanced planning on the guidelines and think, again, looking back on last year, what worked, what didn't, what might we want to do differently. We can do a lot of that work even before we're getting specific information. Okay. From the budgeting entities, right? You know, it's the difference. We do it both ways. Top down,
Figure out how we feel about it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, cause I'm looking for it, I don't actually see it, when do you estimate, preliminary and like final guidelines would be due?
Well, again, those tie into our, the final meetings, but, the final guidelines will be approved 5 weeks before the warrant closes,
Okay.
which is what we don't have. The preliminary guidelines, I think I have scheduled to approve, yeah, they're at the end of October.
Okay.
They would be, that's one of the reasons there's at least 2 meetings in October, because that probably.
Oh, I see it,
we both-
sorry, I just didn't see it.
Yeah, I didn't highlight it, I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
But that would probably happen as our last meeting in October, which is technically, which I was thinking would be October 30th, but again, that's going to depend on what the select board tells us after their meeting in July.
Okay, sounds good. And since you asked, I won't be in Concord on July 31st, but if we have a way of doing it remotely, I'll be here.
All of the meetings will be hybrid.
Should we just over email give feedback about the dates? Or
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll send I will send an email to the full committee that asks people about their availability for those 2 days. The summer's always difficult, and I do want to make sure we have a forum.
And just a recommendation with that too, just send those responses back to you individually.
Oh,
because otherwise,
absolutely.
we don't
Brian,
want to
we put that at the
deliberation.
bottom of every email
Sure.
that is sent to the group. I may have forgotten to do it, with the one I sent out today, but, we always do that. Please
Understood.
reply to me individually so that we don't, deliberate by email. So, thank you, that's a good point. So,
So, Lois, it's Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
Hi. Administratively, will we as a group start receiving these as calendar invitations?
That's something that I will talk to Ryan about, as soon as dates, the dates for July 31st and August 28th, assuming I get enough of a response, so I know we'll have a forum. You will get calendar invitations for when the rest of the dates are firm, we'll set up calendar invitations. And those, I'm hopeful that we can firm up the rest of the calendar on July 31st and get everything out.
Okay,
So the short answer is yes.
it's just really helpful because they
Uh,
based on my calendar. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. No, I understand. It makes it a lot easier.
Peggy has her hand up as well.
Oh, Peggy, I'm sorry.
Sorry, per usual, I have my hand up. Lois, thank you so much for doing this calendar. Last year we had sort of a 14-month calendar, and this year it's cramped back until like 10 or 10 or 11 because of the town meeting date. So we're really under the gun, and I really appreciate the details in this calendar. To meet the deadlines. It's going to be a lot a lot quicker this year.
we just have less time. And,
A lot less time.
a lot, so when, as this document changes and gets more specific, there will be, I will keep everyone apprised of the guidelines, not of the actual deadlines for this, so we always know what we're working on doing. Because that's, that's our core mission is guideline setting, the hearings, the recommendations, the report. That's the core of what we are obligated to deliver to the town, and all of those things have deadlines associated with it. So we need to be aware of them and working against them. Anybody else? Any other discussion? Okay, so I have a long list of follow-ups. So let me do the recap of action items, I will contact the select board to communicate our desire to set up a working group to deal with financial policies generally, but starting with policies on reserves. I will follow up with Wendy to get the link for the financial policy session done by the MMA, and make sure that gets circulated to everybody. I'll talk to Ryan about copies of the model financial policies, but I don't know if those need to be circulated. I think that's really just putting together the materials that the what forms of that. I will follow up with Carmen on the town meeting schedule and emphasize again, really, if we had more than 48 hours between the last year, we need to do it before, it would be so checking. I'm going to talk to Don and Carlin and Harvey about MC9. We're going to figure out how to manage our relationship with that working group. I'll be in touch with Carlisle about the possibility of setting up a joint meeting. And I'm gonna send out an email to everybody specifying the 2 dates we're considering for summer meetings and asking people to get back to me with their availability. Just so that we can determine that we can go ahead with this, we're not doing it. So, that's what I have. Did I forget anything?
I have one thing, and that's to submit the minutes.
Oh, yeah.
I just assume you'll do it. So I just remind you that I've got.
So Arlington has a follow-up to make sure that the approved minutes are submitted to the clerk, so it needs to be posted.
Well, second one.
What?
I have one
Okay,
suggested addition. This isn't for you, this is for anybody whose liaison assignment has been confirmed. Should we reach out to our assigned committee and let them know and do an introduction?
that is an excellent suggestion. So if you know for sure what groups you're working with, then yes, absolutely. And, Eric, I will, when you do that, reach out, copy me, because I would be very happy to come to an initial meeting, coffee, whatever, with Tracy and Andrew, who are the chairs of the school place.
Okay,
So, we'll try and find the dates. I'll forward, now that you guys have agreed, I will forward to you the email I sent to Tracy, letting her know we'll be reaching out as soon as the liaisons are complete. So, yeah, that's a good point, and that's good for all of us to start building those relationships. Well, I've run out of things. Is there any new business, or are we ready for a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
second.
I don't think it was.
No, we don't. It's nothing is on the agenda.
We are adjourning at 8:10, 20 minutes early. We will be giving that time back.